Steve Harvey had asked thousands of questions during his years hosting Family Feud. He had heard funny answers, clever answers, and occasionally shocking answers. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened on a Wednesday afternoon in May 2025. A contestant was about to give an answer so revealing, so desperate, that it would immediately stop the show. Steve Harvey would recognize a cry for help hidden in plain sight. What happened next would save a woman's life, expose years of abuse, and demonstrate that sometimes the people who need help most find the courage to ask for it in the most unexpected ways. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss these powerful moments that remind us to pay attention, to listen carefully, and to help when we see someone in danger. The Morrison family stood on the Family Feud stage ready to compete. There was Jessica Morrison, 34, along with her husband Mark, her sister Amy, her brother-in-law Chris, and her mother Helen. They looked like a typical family ready to have fun and win some money. Jessica stood next to Mark, and to casual observers they appeared to be a normal married couple. But those who looked closely might have noticed that Jessica seemed nervous, that she flinched slightly when Mark touched her arm, that her smile did not quite reach her eyes. Game progressed normally for the first few questions. The Morrison family was doing well, laughing and celebrating correct answers. Then Steve asked a question that seemed simple and innocuous. The question was designed to be lighthearted, meant to get relatable answers that would make the audience laugh. But for Jessica Morrison, standing at that podium under those bright lights, the question became an opportunity. The question was her chance to send a message, to ask for help in the only way she could think of. Steve asked, "Name something you hide from your spouse." Jessica had met Mark Morrison 10 years earlier when she was 24 years old. Mark had seemed perfect at first. He was charming and attentive. He showered Jessica with compliments and gifts. He told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever met. He said he wanted to take care of her forever. Jessica, who had grown up without much money and with an absent father, was drawn to Mark's confidence and his promises of security. They dated for 6 months before Mark proposed. Jessica's family had concerns about the speed of the relationship. Her sister Amy thought Mark was too controlling. Her mother Helen worried that Mark isolated Jessica from her friends, but Jessica was in love, or what she thought was love. She dismissed her family's concerns, believing they just did not understand Mark the way she did. She married him despite their reservations, certain that she was making the right choice. The first few months of marriage were good, or at least Jessica convinced herself they were. Mark was attentive and affectionate, but he also started making rules. Jessica could not go out with friends without his permission. She had to text him throughout the day to let him know where she was and what she was doing. He needed to approve her outfits before she left the house. At first, Jessica thought Mark was just protective. She told herself his behavior showed how much he cared. But the control escalated. Mark took over Jessica's finances, giving her a small allowance and monitoring every purchase. He installed tracking apps on her phone so he always knew her location. He discouraged her from working, saying a wife's place was at home. When Jessica got a job anyway, Mark would call her workplace constantly, creating problems with her employers until she eventually quit. Jessica found herself increasingly isolated, cut off from friends, and limited in her contact with family. The first time Mark hit Jessica was 2 years into their marriage. They had been arguing about Jessica wanting to visit her sister. Mark said she was choosing her family over him. The argument escalated. Mark grabbed Jessica's arm hard enough to leave bruises, then he slapped her across the face. Jessica was shocked and terrified. Mark immediately apologized, crying and saying he did not know what came over him. He promised it would never happen again. He bought her flowers and jewelry. He was extra kind for weeks. Jessica wanted to believe it was a one-time mistake, but it was not a one-time mistake. It happened again and again. The abuse followed a pattern. Mark would explode in anger over something small. He would hit Jessica, push her, grab her roughly. Then he would apologize and shower her with affection. The cycle repeated endlessly. Jessica learned to walk on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering Mark's anger. But there was no predicting what would set him off. A dinner cooked wrong. A comment he misinterpreted. Jessica existing in a way Mark did not approve of in that moment. Jessica tried to hide the abuse from her family. She wore long sleeves to cover bruises. She made excuses for why she could not attend family gatherings. She lied about why she had quit her job. But Amy suspected something was wrong. She noticed how Jessica always checked with Mark before answering simple questions. She saw how Jessica seemed afraid of saying the wrong thing. Amy tried to talk to Jessica about it, but Jessica denied everything. She was ashamed. She was afraid. And Mark had convinced her that no one would believe her. Mark's control extended to every aspect of Jessica's life. He read her emails and text messages. He listened to her phone calls. He decided what she could wear, what she could eat, where she could go. Jessica felt like a prisoner in her own home. She had no money of her own. She had no car because Mark had convinced her to sell hers. She had no friends because Mark had driven them all away. She was completely dependent on Mark for everything, which was exactly what he wanted. Jessica had tried to leave twice. The first time she made it to her sister's house. Mark showed up charming and apologetic in front of Amy. He promised to change. He said he would go to counseling. He said he could not live without Jessica. Jessica, exhausted and scared, went back home with him. The abuse resumed within days. The second time she tried to leave, Mark found her before she even made it out of the house. The beating she received that night was the worst yet. Mark made it clear that if she tried to leave again, he would find her, and it would be worse. The family feud opportunity came about when Mark's coworker mentioned that they were looking for families. Mark thought appearing on television would make them look like a perfect couple. He wanted to present an image of a happy marriage. He told Jessica what to wear, how to act, what to say. He threatened her before they left for the studio. If she embarrassed him or said anything to make him look bad, there would be consequences when they got home. Jessica nodded obediently, having learned that arguing with Mark only made things worse. But standing on that stage under those lights, with cameras rolling and Steve Harvey asking questions, Jessica made a decision. She was tired of being silent. She was tired of pretending everything was okay. She was tired of being afraid. She knew that answering honestly might result in Mark hurting her later. But she also knew that if she did not ask for help now in this public space with witnesses and cameras, she might never get another chance. When Steve asked what people hide from their spouses, Jessica saw her opportunity. Jessica stood at the podium. Her hands were shaking. Mark stood behind her with the rest of the family, watching her carefully. Steve repeated the question with his usual energy. Name something you hide from your spouse. Jessica could have said money or shopping purchases or snacks. Those were the kinds of answers the question was designed to get. Light, funny answers that would make the audience laugh, but Jessica looked directly at the camera and gave an answer that would change everything. Her voice was quiet but clear. Bruises, I hide bruises. The studio fell completely silent. The audience stopped mid-laugh, confused by the unexpected. Steve Harvey's smile faded immediately. He looked at Jessica with concern, then looked at the card in his hand, then looked back at Jessica. That was not a typical family feud answer. That was something else entirely. Steve knew immediately that something was very wrong. Mark's reaction was instant. His face went red. He started to step forward. But Amy, Jessica's sister, grabbed his arm. She had suspected for years that Mark was hurting Jessica. Hearing her sister say those words out loud confirmed everything Amy had feared. Amy held Mark back while Jessica stood at the podium, tears now streaming down her face. The weight of years of silence and abuse was crashing down on her. She had said it. She had asked for help. There was no taking it back now. Steve immediately signaled to stop the cameras. He moved quickly to Jessica's side. Ma'am, are you okay? Are you safe right now? Jessica shook her head, unable to speak through her tears. Steve looked at the production team. Get security now, and I need someone to call the police. He turned back to Jessica. You are safe here. No one is going to hurt you, I promise. His voice was gentle, but his body language was protective, positioning himself between Jessica and Mark. Mark tried to play it off. Come on, this is ridiculous. Jessica is being dramatic. She is not hiding bruises. She is clumsy and bumps into things. Tell them, Jessica. Tell them you are just clumsy. His tone was light, but his eyes were threatening. Jessica had seen that look before. It was the look that came before violence. But this time, Jessica did not back down. She looked at Mark and said words she had never had the courage to say before. No, Mark, I am not clumsy. You hit me. You have been hitting me for years, and I am not protecting you anymore. The audience gasped. Amy started crying. Helen, Jessica's mother, looked shocked and guilty. How had she not known? How had she not seen? Security guards appeared and approached Mark. Sir, we need you to come with us. Mark started to argue, but the security guards were firm. You are going to come with us right now, or the police will handle this when they arrive. Mark, realizing he had no choice, went with the security guards. As he was being led away, he looked back at Jessica with pure hatred in his eyes. You are going to regret this, he said quietly. But Jessica had heard that threat before. This time, she had witnesses. Eve had a chair brought to the stage for Jessica. A production assistant brought her water. Amy sat next to her sister, holding her hand. I am so sorry, Amy said through her tears. I knew something was wrong. I should have done more. I should have helped you. Jessica shook her head. It was not your fault. I hid it. I lied to protect him. I was ashamed. I thought it was my fault somehow. I thought I could fix it if I just tried harder to be a better wife. But nothing I did was ever good enough for him. The police arrived within minutes. They had been called by producers who recognized the seriousness of the situation. Officers took statements from Jessica, Amy, and Helen. Jessica told them everything. Years of abuse, years of control, years of living in fear. She showed them the bruises on her arms that she had covered with makeup. She told them about the threats Mark made when she tried to leave before. The officers listened carefully, taking notes and photos. They explained to Jessica that they would be arresting Mark for domestic violence. They gave her information about protective orders and domestic violence resources. Steve Harvey sat with Jessica and her family in a private room backstage. The game show was forgotten. What mattered now was making sure Jessica was safe and had the resources she needed. Steve spoke gently but directly. "Jessica, what you did took incredible courage. I need you to know that none of this is your fault. Abuse is never the victim's fault. Mark chose to hurt you. That was his choice, not yours. You did nothing to deserve that treatment. Do you understand what I am telling you?" Jessica nodded, crying. "I know logically that it is not my fault, but emotionally I have blamed myself for years. I thought if I could just be better, he would stop. If I could cook the right meals, keep the house perfect, say the right things, he would be the man I thought he was when we first met. But nothing worked. Nothing was ever good enough, and the abuse kept getting worse." Steve reached over and squeezed her hand. "That is what abusers do. They make you think you are the problem, but you are not the problem, he is." A domestic violence advocate arrived. She had been called by the production team who wanted to make sure Jessica had professional support. The advocate, Maria, introduced herself and explained the resources available. She talked about emergency shelters where Jessica could stay safely while getting a protective order. She discussed counseling services. She explained the legal process for domestic violence cases. She made it clear that Jessica had options and that she did not have to face this alone. Amy spoke up. "Jessica is staying with me. She is not going back to that house." Helen agreed. "We will keep her safe. Whatever she needs, we will provide it." Maria nodded approvingly. Family support is crucial. "But we also need to make sure you all understand the danger level. Mark has been violent for years. He has made threats. He is likely to escalate now that Jessica has publicly exposed him. You need to take precautions. Change locks. Install security systems. Do not let Jessica be alone. Take this seriously." The police returned to update everyone. Mark had been arrested and charged with domestic violence. He was being held pending a bail hearing. They recommended Jessica file for an emergency protective order immediately. They explained that even with Mark in custody, she should take safety precautions. Statistics showed that leaving an abusive partner was the most dangerous time for victims. Mark would be angry. He would feel his control slipping away. He would likely try to contact Jessica or find her when he was released. Steve made a personal commitment to Jessica and her family. "I am going to make sure you have security. I'm going to make sure you have legal representation. I'm going to connect you with the best domestic violence resources in the country. You showed courage today by asking for help. I'm going to make sure that courage is rewarded with real support and protection." The Family Feud production company is also committing resources to help you rebuild your life safely. Jessica looked at Steve with gratitude and disbelief. "Why are you doing all this? You do not even know me." Steve looked at her seriously. "Because you asked for help in the only way you could think of. Because you trusted that standing on this stage and telling the truth would lead to help rather than more harm. And because I have a platform and resources, and if I do not use them to help someone in danger, then what good are they? You matter, Jessica. Your safety matters, and I am going to do everything in my power to help you." The Family Feud episode never aired in its original form. Instead, 6 months after the incident, a special documentary aired showing what had happened with Jessica's permission. The documentary followed her journey from that moment on stage through the legal process, protective orders, divorce proceedings, and her path to healing. It became one of the most watched and most important pieces of television in raising awareness about domestic violence. After leaving the Family Feud studio that day, Jessica never returned to the home she had shared with Mark. She stayed with Amy and her family while getting the legal protections in place. The emergency protective order was granted immediately. Mark was ordered to stay away from Jessica and her family. He was not allowed to contact her in any way. He was released on bail but fitted with an ankle monitor. He was told that any violation of the protective order would result in immediate arrest. Mark violated the protective order 3 times in the first month. He sent threatening messages through fake social media accounts. He drove by Amy's house. He showed up at a store where Jessica was shopping. Each violation resulted in additional charges and stricter bail conditions. Eventually, Mark was held without bail until his trial. The judge recognized that he posed a clear danger to Jessica and could not be trusted to follow court orders. Jessica began intensive therapy to process years of abuse and trauma. Her therapist specialized in domestic violence survivors. Through therapy, Jessica learned about trauma bonding, learned why she had stayed as long as she did, and learned that her responses to abuse were normal survival mechanisms. She learned to recognize the signs of abuse so she would never miss them again. She learned to rebuild her sense of self that Mark had systematically destroyed over years of psychological and physical violence. The divorce process was difficult. Mark tried to use it to maintain control, fighting over every asset and making false accusations. But Jessica had Steve Harvey's promised legal team supporting her. They had documented evidence of abuse. They had testimony from family and friends. They had medical records of injuries. The judge granted Jessica a divorce with a restraining order and awarded her a fair division of assets. Mark was ordered to attend a batterer intervention program, though everyone knew he would likely not change. 6 months after that day on the Family Feud stage, Jessica appeared on Steve Harvey's talk show. The transformation was remarkable. She still carried trauma and was still healing, but she also looked lighter, freer. She spoke about her experience with honesty and courage. She explained how she had used the Family Feud question as an opportunity to ask for help because she felt she had no other way. She talked about the abuse, the fear, the shame, and the decision to finally speak up. Steve asked her the question many people wanted answered. What gave you the courage to say what you said on that stage? Jessica thought for a moment before answering. I think it was desperation more than courage. I was so tired of being afraid. I was so tired of lying and hiding. And I realized that if I did not ask for help right then, I might never get another chance. Mark controlled everything in my life, but he could not control what I said on that stage in that moment. So I used the only power I had, which was my voice. Jessica became an advocate for domestic violence survivors. She started speaking at shelters and support groups. She shared her story to help other women recognize the signs of abuse and understand that leaving is possible. She emphasized that she had resources and support that many survivors do not have, acknowledging her privilege while also using her platform to advocate for more resources for all survivors. She partnered with domestic violence organizations to raise money and awareness. Steve Harvey created a partnership between Family Feud and the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Every episode began including the hotline number with a message that help is available. The show committed funding to domestic violence organizations. Steve personally funded emergency housing for survivors leaving abusive relationships. He used his platform to educate audiences about domestic violence, about warning signs, about how to help if you suspect someone is being abused. The documentary that aired 6 months after the incident had a profound impact. Domestic violence hotlines reported a huge increase in calls in the days following the broadcast. Many survivors said watching Jessica's story gave them courage to leave their own abusive relationships. Many said they had not realized that what they were experiencing was abuse until they saw it described in Jessica's story. The documentary won multiple awards and became required viewing in many domestic violence training programs. 1 year after leaving Mark, Jessica had rebuilt her life in ways she never thought possible. She got a job working for a domestic violence organization, using her experience to help other survivors. She moved into her own apartment, the first time she had lived alone in years. She reconnected with friends she had lost during her marriage. She spent time with family without fear. She made her own decisions about her life without checking with anyone for permission. Jessica wrote a book about her experience titled Breaking the Silence: How One Answer Changed My Life. The book detailed her relationship with Mark from the beginning, the gradual escalation of control and abuse, her attempts to leave, and finally her decision to ask for help on national television. She included resources for survivors and information about domestic violence. The book became a bestseller and helped countless people understand domestic violence better. Mark was eventually convicted on multiple charges, including domestic violence, violating protective orders, and stalking. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, followed by probation. He was ordered to complete a batterer intervention program and was prohibited from contacting Jessica for the rest of his life. Jessica attended the sentencing hearing. She gave a victim impact statement describing the years of abuse and its lasting effects. She spoke directly to Mark, telling him that he no longer had power over her and that she had reclaimed her life. 3 years after that moment on the Family Feud stage, Jessica reflected on her journey in a follow-up interview with Steve Harvey. She talked about the ongoing healing process, acknowledging that trauma does not simply disappear once you leave an abusive relationship. She discussed the hypervigilance she still experienced, the nightmares she still sometimes had, the ways abuse had changed her. But she also talked about joy, about freedom, about the life she was building on her own terms. She shared something powerful about her answer that day. People ask me if I regret how I asked for help. They say maybe I should have gone to the police or told my family directly, But here is what they do not understand. I had tried those things. Mark was charming. He convinced people I was exaggerating or lying. The one time I went to police, Mark talked his way out of it. My family knew something was wrong, but I always denied it. I needed to ask for help in a way that could not be ignored or explained away. I needed witnesses and cameras and a public record. That answer on Family Feud gave me all of that. Steve spoke about the experience often in his own interviews and speeches. He emphasized the importance of paying attention when someone asks for help, even in unconventional ways. He talked about the responsibility that comes with having a platform. He encouraged others in positions of influence to use their resources to help people in crisis. He reminded audiences that domestic violence happens in all communities, among all demographics, and that anyone could be a victim regardless of education, income, or background. 5 years after Jessica's brave answer, research showed that domestic violence awareness and reporting had increased significantly. Advocates credited high-profile cases like Jessica's with helping reduce stigma and encouraging more survivors to seek help. Training programs for police, judges, and social workers incorporated lessons from Jessica's case about believing victims and taking protective measures seriously. Laws were strengthened in several states regarding stalking and protective order violations. Jessica eventually started dating again, something she had been terrified to do. She was careful and cautious, watching for red flags, refusing to compromise her boundaries. She found a partner who respected her, supported her healing, and understood her triggers. She learned that healthy relationships existed, that not all men were like Mark, and that she deserved love without fear. She learned to trust again, slowly and carefully, giving herself permission to be vulnerable while maintaining her safety. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We share these powerful moments because they can literally save lives. Jessica Morrison used her voice when she had nothing else. She gave an answer on a game show that saved her life. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Tell someone you trust. Ask for help in whatever way you can. You are not alone, you are not at fault, and you deserve to be safe. Whether you are a survivor, someone who suspects a friend or family member is being abused, or someone who wants to support this cause, your awareness matters. Your willingness to help matters. Share this video so others know that help is available and that speaking up can change everything. Thank you for watching, and remember that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell the truth.